There are some machines that always pop up on those worst of all time lists. And this one, it's a regular. It's this incredible mix of corrugated iron, farm equipment, and just pure, uncut desperation. So today, let's get into the absolutely wild story of the Bob Semple Tank.
Okay, first things first. Just look at this thing. Seriously. It's so tall, so awkward looking. It honestly looks more like a garden shed on tractor treads than an actual weapon of war. And when you see it, your brain can't help but ask one very simple question.
And yeah, it's really tempting to just write it off, right? But to really get what's going on with this bizarre machine, you can't just look at the tank itself. Nope. We have to go back in time, back to the world that was so desperate it actually needed something like this.
So, to figure out why on earth anyone would build this, we've got to wind the clock back to 1940. And this was, without a doubt, one of the darkest, most terrifying moments of the entire Second World War. The whole world really felt like it was on the brink of total collapse.
Okay, so picture this. It's early 1940, and New Zealand is waiting for military gear, including tanks, to arrive from Britain. But then, the fall of France happens. It's a total disaster. Pretty much all of Britain's heavy equipment is lost. And all of a sudden, New Zealand is staring down the very real, very terrifying possibility of a Japanese invasion. They were completely cut off and basically defenseless.
And the thing is, they had no way to build their own tanks from scratch, no heavy industry for that. And with Britain in crisis, nobody was coming to help them. The choice was terrifyingly simple. Either get creative and improvise with what you've got, or face an invasion with nothing. And that level of desperation, that's what led to a very unorthodox idea.
Right in the middle of this crisis, New Zealand's Minister of Works, a guy named Bob Semple, steps up. He pushes for a plan that was, let's say, as ingenious as it was, well, you're about to see just how wild it was. The thinking behind it was actually pretty simple when you break it down. Look, New Zealand didn't have any tanks, but what did they have? A whole lot of Caterpillar D8 tractors for farming and construction. So the idea was born. What if we create a pre-made armored shell, like a big metal box, that could be quickly bolted onto a tractor base in just a few hours during a national emergency?
So where did this genius design come from? A top-secret military lab? A team of brilliant engineers? Nope, there were no blueprints, no design team. Bob Semple, and you're not going to believe this, he basically improvised the whole thing based on a postcard he'd seen. A postcard from America that showed a tractor that had been converted for military use. I mean, talk about pure seat-of-your-pants engineering. The grand plan, the vision, was to have these armored hulls stashed all over the country. If an invasion fleet was spotted, the call would go out, they'd grab every tractor they could find, bolt these things on, and bam, you've got an instant, homegrown armored force ready to go. It was a super ambitious plan for sure, born out of total necessity. But the reality of how it worked out, yeah, that was a little different.
So you have this idea on a postcard, right? How does that actually turn into a real functioning machine? Well, this is where things kind of start to go off the rails. The practical problems with the design started to stack up, and boy, did they stack up fast.
All right, let's look at the specs on paper, because they give us some major clues. First off, it was heavy. We're talking 25.5 tons. It needed a huge crew, like 6 to 8 people. For weapons, it had 6 Bren machine guns bolted on. And the armor, it was just corrugated plating, like you'd see on a roof. The hope was that the wavy ridges might deflect bullets, but out of all these numbers, there's one that just jumps off the page.
And that's its height. At nearly 12 feet tall, this thing was a monster. Just a massive, top-heavy, unstable target. Can you imagine that looming over a battlefield? It would be incredibly easy for the enemy to spot, and, you guessed it, incredibly difficult to drive without just tipping right over. And the problems just kept coming. Because it was built on a tractor, it was ridiculously slow. And get this, to change gears, the driver had to bring the entire 25-ton machine to a dead stop. Oh, and the vibrations from that big tractor engine, they were so bad that trying to aim any of the machine guns with any accuracy was, well, it was basically impossible.
But honestly, nothing sums up the sheer improvised madness of this design quite like this one detail. To fire one of the forward machine guns, a crew member had to literally lie down on a mattress that was placed directly on top of the scorching hot, roaring engine. I mean, wow.
It's just the perfect, most absurd symbol of trying to make the best of a truly awful situation. So you've got this long list of problems, right? You can probably guess how the public reacted when this new wonder weapon was finally shown off. Let's just say it did not go over well.
Yet when the tank was actually driven in public parades, the reaction wasn't national pride. It was just widespread ridicule. People laughed at it, they saw it as a total joke, a symbol of incompetence, not a clever solution. But Bob Semple himself, the guy whose name is on the tank, he stood by it. And his defense of it really cuts to the core of this whole story. He basically said, I don't see anyone else coming up with any better ideas. And he had a point. It might have been a terrible tank, but in that moment of crisis, it was something. It was an attempt. And back then, better ideas were nowhere to be found.
Ultimately, though, the whole project was scrapped. The Army took one look and officially decided they were just too impractical to use. They were quietly taken apart and disposed of. Not a single Bob Semple tank ever saw combat, so its legacy, for the most part, has been one of failure and mockery. But maybe that's not the whole story.
So that brings us right back to where we started. Was this the worst tank ever built? Well, if you're looking at it from a purely technical standpoint, then yeah, absolutely, it's a strong contender. But it was also something more. It was a symbol of a nation staring down the barrel of annihilation and refusing to just give up. It was them using absolutely everything they had to prepare for the worst. And it leaves us with a much bigger question, doesn't it? When you're facing impossible odds, when you're staring into the abyss, is a flawed attempt better than no attempt at all?